Hi, it's Dr. Mark Fulcher here. It's my pleasure to be joined today by Dr. George Chiampas. George is the Chief Medical Officer of US Soccer. He is an emergency and sports medicine doctor, and he's an assistant professor at Northwestern University in Chicago. So my pleasure to be joined today by George.
Mark, it's great to be here and look forward to this next 20 or 30 minutes.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting topic, creating a model and culture of safety within the game. So I guess I'll hand it over to you to tell us a bit more about that.
Sounds good. And to start off with a little background, creating a model and culture of safety within the game is a priority, I think, for every federation. It touches on youth sports globally, and we're going to walk through a couple little innovative mechanisms and programs that we've created at United States Soccer that serves our members.
Great.
So, like most federations, we all have a mission statement, and at United States Soccer, our mission statement is to make soccer the preeminent sport in the United States. And just like all federations in all countries in the world, we're all competing for youth players, different cultures, both genders in the sport of soccer. And so for us, there's different aspects of it. Access to the sport, making sure that it's enjoyable and it's fun. It's competitive and it offers that competition. But then finally, I think to be the preeminent sport in the United States is that you have to resonate this aspect of safety. Parents look to different sports that provide healthy environments where youth can remain healthy, not become obese, not struggle with the issues of diabetes and obesity and hypertension. And from the federation's perspective, if we can make sure that our sport is not only offering those aspects, but at the same time implementing rules and regulations around the sport that highlight that culture of safety, that will allow us to become the preeminent sport.
Great.
So one of the initiatives that we did is what we realized from our membership, and our membership is the 4+ million youth players that play across the sport, is that our member associations and our states that comprise the United States kept looking to one single entity to provide the information that they need in this area of health and safety. So Recognize to Recover is our slogan, and it is our platform where we implement all the content pieces around sports safety in the United States. This was launched in 2015. It was its first of its kind program developed within the United States in the sport of soccer. And what I've done is essentially brought together medical experts across different disciplines to create education for coaches, players, parents, and referees. And we're going to walk through some of the innovative ways we've done that.
Okay, sounds excellent. Let's keep going.
Let's do it. So, one of the big things is creating rules and recommendations. And while this might be a little bit of a controversial one, and I'm sure we're going to have questions during this session, one of the first things we did was we looked at the sport of soccer in the United States. And several years ago, we brought in different experts. We looked at what current research existed. And we also looked at common sense and looked at other sports to see how they are protecting their athletes. And what we recognize in the sport of soccer is that where concussions occurred specifically were in what we described as aerial challenges, not necessarily heading the ball. We know that thus far the research shows that purposeful heading does not lead to a concussion. If there's any head-to-ball contact, it's typically when an athlete is unaware that the ball is coming to them. But in aerial challenges, meaning when two players are going for the ball, upwards of 60 to 70% of the concussions occur during that aerial challenge. Head to head, head to elbow, knee to head. And so what we devised from that is if we can protect our players, especially at that young population where they're learning this technique of jumping, landing, falling, and all of them are doing that at various different times in their development, we could potentially protect kids from quitting the game, protect kids from having a concussion and then looking at the game and not wanting to participate. And so we implemented some heading restrictions, which from 10 and under, there was no heading in the sport of soccer. And then between 11 and 13, we created some parameters that directed coaches to limit the amount of headers, but also be innovative and provide soft balls, balloons, and really highlight that technique that we hope ultimately will protect the players in the long run.
Okay, so your thinking there is around preventing the collision associated with the header rather than the header itself.
Correct.
Right.
It has nothing to do with heading. And some of the misconceptions that came out from this rule was that we insinuated that heading the ball led to concussions. It's absolutely the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. I think that's probably not something that's well understood by a lot of people in the football medicine community.
Agreed.
Okay, what about the spotters? Tell us a little bit about that.
So spotters, we see in other sports the use of spotters to be able to provide information to the physicians and the medical staff out on the field. So even before FIFA allowed medical communications, in non-FIFA games, we implemented spotters for our national team games. And so, and in some instances, it works. Realize that we're sometimes constrained by different environments. So, for example, if we go to Honduras or other entities, we may not necessarily have live TV feeds that can give us really up-to-date information. However, having someone in an elevated position with a medical communication via radio to the staff on the field may give you some information that ultimately can be valuable in your assessment of a player if an injury were to occur.
So you're looking essentially for help around identifying mechanism of injury and seeing what's happened to the players.
Yeah, anytime you can get additional information, you should be able to access it.
Cool.
So another innovative program, and we launched this last year, was the Pledge. Taylor Twellman, who's one of the individuals who used to play for the Federation, retired because of concussion injuries. He's very popular in the United States. He's a TV broadcaster in the game of soccer. He created this pledge in the region where he lives in Boston. What we did a year ago was we partnered with Taylor and the Pledge, and we implemented it across the Development Academy last year. And our Development Academy consists of about 17 to 18,000 of the top players, both males and females. And it was really well received. And it's very, very simple. The concept is simply that all players, parents, coaches, and referees at the beginning of the year take a pledge. The way the pledge proceeds is I pledge to be educated, I pledge to be honest, and I pledge to be supportive of anyone who gets a concussion. And what it entails is it starts creating this culture that when you've owned something and you've stated that, we feel that you're going to act upon it. And so last year we did this within our Development Academy, and it was well received. And this year, in 2018, we expanded it across the country, across the United States, for all of our players. So all 4 to 5 million players, we expanded this to them. Obviously, we utilized all of our Federation's social media, national team games, marketing campaigns, advertising, having our player ambassadors, former national team players, current national team players, Julie Foudy, who's a female player, and it really garnered a tremendous amount of support. And just some recent data that's come on that I haven't put in here is some of the awareness numbers that we've seen from one year to the other have increased by 2 to 3-fold, meaning awareness of concussion symptoms, awareness of what the pledge means to them. So we objectively have seen that it's been really effective, and we're really excited about this program moving forward.
Yeah, we've talked about it before, but I really like it. I mean, I think this is something that if you're listening out there, you could implement tomorrow at your club or at your city or your association.
Yeah, and at no cost. I mean, those are some of the things that always seem to be hurdles is expense. This is really just disseminating message through your membership.
And it's really helping with that whole message that, concussion is everyone's responsibility. It's not the member association's responsibility. It's not the doctor's responsibility. It's everyone's.
And that's the platform of Recognize to Recover. There's a reason why we have the touch points of players, parents, coaches, and referees, is because we are all a team in this.
Cool.
So another area, what we did is we actually hosted the first ever head injury in soccer summit. This followed the Berlin concussion guidelines that came out in 2016. The following year, in New York, we brought together several members from that Berlin Consensus Summit, but also ones from the United States. And we came together and looked at implementing those guidelines that came from Berlin, specifically in the sport of soccer. So looking at headgear and restrictions of heading and various different things, CTE, and a paper is going to come out from this head injury summit probably in the next 3 to 6 months. But it'll be the first specific consensus guidelines in the sport of soccer, and we're really excited about that. But what really is good about this is it shows our members in the United States that we're looking at head injuries in soccer specific, not necessarily taking other sports rules and regulations and just trying to implement them in the sport, but looking at our sport critically from the inside out.
Great. Well, we might have to get you back.
Well, we'll host it maybe around the world.
Yeah, right.
So, we're going to switch gears a little bit from concussions and head injuries, but, cardiac safety is just as important as everything else, including heat. And one of the things that is really, really important is to have comprehensive programs because we don't want to leave any elements out. We know that while, cardiac arrest may be something that is not something that's common, it's common when it affects you. And so one of the things I always say is I want parents across the United States to realize that our program is comprehensive, and it's built around developing emergency action plans. And this one specifically is about cardiac safety. What we did in the United States is we have posters and PDFs that clubs can download that really highlight hands-only CPR. And the use of defibrillators and the importance of them and how important they are in a very rapid and efficient way. But one of the most innovating things we did, Mark, is we actually produced a 4-minute CPR and AED video that's soccer specific. So we utilized one of our clubs, one of our development academy clubs, and we had a content piece. We hired actors, and we literally produced a 4-minute CPR video that within it is all the educational information you need, the content, walking through CPR, hands-only CPR, 100 beats per minute, and the use of a defibrillator. And what you're going to see is how we've implemented some of these things to really develop a culture of safety.
Yeah, and people can go to this URL and have a look at that?
That's right. It's all outward facing. It's all free. It's on Recognize to Recover. Our concussion video, our CPR video is there for everyone to be able to access it.
Great. Sounds almost as good as the one we have at New Zealand football.
There you go. I can say I didn't see it, but and then we're going to transition over to heat safety guidelines in the United States, and I'm sure around the world. One of the things that happens is we have about 15 to 20 youth deaths related to heat, and as everyone states, death from heat stroke is something that is absolutely preventable. So we are very, very excited about our heat guidelines. About 2 to 3 years ago, we sat down with some experts at Corey Stringer Institute, and I do a lot of work in regards to heat with my background as medical director for the Bank of America Chicago Marathon. But we utilize this flag color system, and it's really, really innovative because it took the map of the United States and divided it in 3 categories, and that's been based off of science. Because what we know is regions in the north, those kids are less acclimated to heat than, let's say, kids in the south of the United States. And we can't necessarily have one set of weather restrictions. And so this has taken this into account. And it obviously looks at the wet bulb globe temperature, which is a combination of the ambient temperature and the humidity. Not everybody needs a fancy device. What we've also done is we've created a screen that if you go to our website, if you find the humidity in your area and the temperature, you can run down on a screen what your wet bulb globe temperature is predicted. And then this screen shows you, where you are categorically in the United States. And then it shows you based on the wet bulb globe temperature, it gives you actually recommendations. So work-rest ratios, what you should do with regards to hydration opportunities, and then even in the areas where if it's too extreme, that you should really consider canceling that day of training or games.
And again, another great initiative. A lot of people think that managing heat is about just staying hydrated. But yeah, there's really a lot more to it, isn't it?
Oh, it's beyond hydration. I think the messaging, if you just think hydration is preventing heat stroke, you're really, really wrong and potentially going down a slippery slope. Heat illness and heat stroke is by constant exercise and not really stopping and having an opportunity to cool down, but also implementing some safety things like having ice immersion tubs and really being cognizant of symptoms for any sort of heat illness. So taking all of this and all this content is great to have it. And one of the things we also realized is having a website doesn't necessarily drive people to that website. And so we felt that there are certain things that we feel that our coaches and our referees ultimately all should have a standard or baseline understanding with regards to medical safety. So we at US Soccer recently launched a digital coaching center, and it's not just in medical safety, it's across the coaching elements. But I was able to sit down with our coaching leadership and express the importance of this content and this platform. And what we just recently launched literally last month, which is this introduction to safe and healthy playing environments. And what it's done is it's taken all the content that we've just walked through, plus additional content that's not on this, such as bleeding and fractures, environmental issues like lightning, and has in 30 minutes created a program that every coach in the United States and ultimately every referee in the United States will mandatorily have to view, and then thus allows us hopefully to create this culture of safety and awareness that we now can look across our sport and at minimum say they've gone through this education.
Yeah, I mean, it's great from a health point of view, but I guess it's also great for the organization to be able to show to the world that this is important.
I 100% agree, and not only is it important, it's actually fairly easy. I think sometimes we think we have to be really, really big and innovative. Sometimes if you do the basic things really well, it almost has a greater impact than trying to find something that is extremely innovative. So we also created this Concussion Awareness Week. We just finished it literally this earlier in the month. But we took advantage of the first week of the soccer season, sports season in the United States, and part of our pledge campaign with Taylor Twellman, which is Think Taylor, was disseminate this message of Concussion Awareness Week. To start off the season where we utilize all of the Federation's resources, our social media, our Twitter, our Facebook, our player ambassadors. You could see our marketing campaigns in big cities where we were having international friendlies like New York, some of our messaging. And this now puts soccer in the United States, as you can imagine, in the forefront. We're always kind of chasing necessarily the NFL or other sports, Major League Baseball, but now soccer in the United States has a platform where kids can actually see that soccer is important, that is a critical piece. And we're able to, kind of be innovative, have kids take out a pledge, fill out a pledge card online, have a chance to win tickets to a national team game, and really build this awareness that we hope will be something that becomes annual within our messaging.
So George, fascinating insights. As you say, it's not necessarily difficult, but getting it to happen can be challenging. So I guess I commend you on your hard work.
Well, it's sometimes if you try to keep it simple, and a lot of the credit goes to our federation and having a belief in a platform, and sometimes listening to their medical experts allows you to be creative. And I think kudos to FIFA and all the work FIFA is doing on the medical side, and yourself, Mark, because what we really are, we're one family. And being able to disseminate some of these simple skill sets and simple messaging allows the sport to grow exponentially and in a safe way.
Well, you're not quite off the hook yet. So as you know, for those of you listening out there, you have the opportunity to pose questions to our experts. And to do that, you need to log into the network and join the 11 and 11 group, and you have the opportunity to write some questions there. And so we've got a few of those today. So George, can you tell us, obviously from a medical point of view, you've had some experts tell you that heading might be something that you should be limiting for the kids. But how are the coaches and users of the game, how have they taken that?
Well, it's a question that I think if you ask the coaches in England or in Europe, you'd have a different response from the coaches in the United States. Quite frankly, when we first implemented this, we received some negative criticism from around the globe. Within our own community, what we realized, and I can share this is because we've sent out a survey, is that most of our coaches in the United States, upwards of 80 and 90%, were really not implementing a significant amount of heading at those younger ages, which was an interesting thing that we saw. However, what we also were able to do was those that were potentially implementing a huge amount of heading unnecessarily, we feel like we've put some parameters around that. So we have a paper that's going to be coming out because we did a survey on our restrictions, and I think some of the interesting things that came out of it is the amount of heading that's occurring at those younger ages is actually very small. The amount of concussions that occurred really do start spiking between 12 and 14 years old. And so it begs some questions that we obviously will have to deal with in the future. But overall, it's been really positive from our coaches. It's been something that we feel like our parents have recognized that at minimum United States Soccer and the Federation has addressed this issue and is at least put it as a talking point as opposed to hiding from it. And I think that is one of the biggest things that has come out from this. And what we're starting to see is that other parts of the world are having the same conversations, which ultimately I think are going to make our players safer.
So the next question, you did cover a little bit, but in the United States, would your average football club have the ability to measure the wet bulb globe temperature?
Yeah, and that's a great question, Mark. And part of Recognize to Recover, and when I first created it, was we have to make it simple. As soon as you try to create something that's complicated or expensive for any club, you're going to lose them, and you're not going to be able to get that message. And so within even our heat guidelines, we took this into account. While some of these wet bulb globe devices may cost somewhere between $200 and $400 in the United States, we've taken that component out. By having the chart and the graph that you can simply look at, have an app on your phone, look at today's humidity and the temperature, and you can walk down that graph and predict what your wet bulb globe temperature environment. That is cost-free. That requires literally about 25 seconds of a coach to get that information. And I think as a club, when you have that culture within your club, the parents, the players all see you to be a very responsible club and looking out for their kids. So we've taken that into account. We agree that simple, free, or extremely cost-effective is really, really important.
I mean, that is a good tip, isn't it? We've all got a phone, and the opportunity is there for almost everywhere in the world to look at temperature and humidity, isn't it?
Without question. You have one of your players look at it if you can.
Yeah. And I think this is the last question, but how hard was it to convince the coach educators, I guess the guys delivering coach education at US Soccer, that they should include medical matters in their curriculum? Like, it's not coaching, it's medicine. Was that hard?
You know what? I think one of the dynamics that I'm a little bit fortunate is in my role as chief medical officer, I'm within our federation. I'm embedded. I'm an employee within the federation, and I say that only because while I say that, the importance of that is really significant. If you're in a federation and you're someone who is not visible, not integrated in the program, your voice may not necessarily be something that's heard all the time. Don't get me wrong, you're seeing a finished product, but knocking on the door, constantly reminding our coaching education that this is equally important. And if we truly want to be the preeminent sport in the United States, this is equally as important. And to their credit, it didn't take much convincing. We actually, when our coaching education started creating their content, ours was already done. And so we were actually way ahead of even our coaches. And so we're really excited about it. Our coaches and our coaching leadership are really excited about it as well, because they actually now go out and promote this as part of a really integral piece within their coaching education.
Great. So, once again, George, thank you very much for your time today. And I'm sure this is something that will give a lot of us food for thought and opportunities to do something a little different and probably a little better.
Thanks for the opportunity, Mark, and to FIFA and allowing us to highlight some of the things we're doing in the United States, and look forward to player safety across the world.
Great. Thank you very much.